How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Oh, you know what? I can't complain. I do appreciate you coming and spending some time with us today. It is definitely my honor and a privilege. It's good to see you in person, as we talked a little bit on the phone last night, but not on camera. So it's good to see you.
Well, thank you very much. I need to apologize because I am not at home in my own little studio. I had to stop and I'm using someone else's place.
Oh, no
So you
worries.
might see somebody else's name down on the bottom as opposed to mine.
Oh no, it actually came up as yours, so that is perfect, and
Oh,
that is
okay.
not a problem. We have I've been going through it this morning, trying to get this thing going. You know, I practiced everything and made sure everything worked, and then today none of it worked. So that's just how it goes, you know.
Well, that's about par because I've been struggling with this for the last 25 minutes.
Really? Well, I mean, I had everything launched. I had the Zoom meeting going, and I was just telling the audience that you got to do things in certain order, or the programs don't like it. So I had to cancel the Zoom, cancel the live, and then relaunch it all. So that's why I had to send you a new link.
Okay.
But
Well,
here,
here we are.
Here we are, for sure. So I kind of talked a little bit about you. I was telling folks, I gave them your name and a little bit of the history on, my grandfather and my dad, and being an ordained minister back in the '80s. And I don't know what year you became an ordained
Well,
minister.
actually, it was 1989.
'89, okay.
1989. I was licensed by Dr. McKinney at Mount Zion Baptist Church.
In
And
Seattle,
then
Washington.
in 1998, I think it was, I was ordained again by Dr. McKinney at Mount Zion Baptist Church.
Wow. And so what I was reflecting on with folks was, back in the '80s, it definitely wasn't very progressive at that time as far as women, clergy. Uh, can you speak about that just a little bit before we get into the questions? And
Well, only to say that Mount Zion was always progressive in that in 1926, and this is a matter of written history, um, we did have a woman who was an assistant pastor at Mount Zion Baptist Church.
mm-hmm.
And right now her name escapes me, but this was in 1926.
Mm.
And she
Wow.
lived on Yesler, I think it was. And if I were home, I could pull up her name immediately, but I can't do that now. But she was listed as Mrs. whatever her name it was, assistant pastor. Yeah.
Raymond Pato.
Wow.
And
That.
so from that day until probably I think the 19 early 1980s, we had no women ministers at Mount Zion. And I think that either Reverend Dr. Patricia Hunter was the first,
Mm-hmm.
and then came Reverend Louise Woods.
Okay.
And then after that, of course, was myself. And then we had a progression of women, but Mount Zion has always been a rather progressive church in that sense. And I think it was in around 1972, when the new sanctuary was built and the chapel, we had stained glass windows uh, around the perimeter of the interior of Mount Zion. And
Mm-hmm.
there were several women in those stained glass windows, one of which was Sojourner Truth.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah, back in, I think it was in 1972. Now, the interesting thing about these stained glass windows was that they are one of a kind and were created and handcrafted by an African American who, at that time, was the only African American in the country who was doing that kind of work. and he was based in Cleveland, Ohio. So Mount Zion is very fortunate to have these stained glass windows, one of a kind. Yes. And as I said, Sojourner Truth, my distinguished contemporary ancestor slash mentor is one of those depicted in the stained glass windows.
You know what's so fascinating about that story is, I attended that church for 12 years. My dad attended that church for, I mean, decades. And I had no idea of that history that was there. And I remember, sitting through sermons and choir rehearsal, or, coming while dad was doing choir rehearsal and sitting in the pew and just looking at different things, at the stained glass and the draperies that hung in the, on the pulpit in the back, and looking at all the symbols. Yeah, looking at all the symbols and not really knowing the history behind it, but just, kind of enamored with it and looking at it. And, as a kid, sometimes you tune out the sermon and folks talking and whatnot. But, I mean, it was just really beautiful. I mean, it was a fantastic church for sure.
Well, it really is a demonstration of how art enhances the worship experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say art, not only visual art, but when you think about the music, the sanctuary choir, the gospel choir, and all of the beautiful paintings that are in the church, it's just that art speaks to the creativity of God, and how God manifests that creativity in each of us as we project that into the worship experience through song, through spoken word, through poetry, through scripture. And it's just a beautiful thing to blend all of that together along with Black history.
Absolutely. Well, and the music also, I don't know if I've ever attended a church that didn't have a pipe organ that my dad didn't take me to. And so thinking about the pipe organs at Mount Zion and watching him on the bench and, the 3 sets of keys, and he's using both feet for the pedals and just playing, and he loved it. He loved it. And it's just something awesome.
Well, I loved both of the Reverends, Reverend Cameron Winthrops. Yes.
Well,
in fact, I can hear the younger Reverend Winthrop Cameron laughing right now.
Oh, glory. Hallelujah. Cinemasita.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely miss Dad, but his presence is always here. So
I know.
and he helps guide me on the things that I do. So in the short time when you look back at your whole life, that someone's in your life, and adopting all of us, and he didn't have to do that.
Right.
He just passed on such profound love, and it is manifest in me, and so I'm really thankful for that.
Well, we are too. Yes.
Well, let me ask you some questions. Let's go into the questions, and if we deviate at all, that's fine, and we got plenty of time. There's no time limit, but I did want to ask you some of the ones that were on our list. So the first one was, what does Black History Month mean to you, and what does Black history mean to you? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, let's start with Black History Month.
Okay.
And you hear a lot of people say that we really don't need a Black History Month, that Black history is every day.
Right.
And that is true. Our history is every day. And we don't seem to, many of us, realize that we who are living in this present time, we are making a history. We are. And that at some point in time, people are going to look back and talk about what it is you have done, that you are doing. So we make history every day. Now, the important thing to me about setting aside a month, first I have to give honor and respect to Carter G. Woodson for having the courage to initiate such a recognition. I have to respect him for that. He felt the need to do it.
Now, who is Carter G. Woodson? Because when we think of Black History Month, we
Carter
think
G.
of.
Woodson. Huh?
I said when we talk about Black History Month, it's always Dr. King and Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks. But so who is this that you're speaking of right now?
Carter G. Woodson initiated the I call it celebration, the recognition of Black history. It started out as a day, and he did it because he felt that people needed to know more about what Black people had done and were doing. So he initiated this recognition. And then I think in 1926 or thereabouts, and then later it became a month-long celebration.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so we need to have this time set aside to pay particular attention to our distinguished contemporary ancestors, as well as Black people of today. We need to call it special. We need to be intentional about that.
Absolutely.
But we also need to keep it in mind every single day, which we do. And it's the same thing as saying, why do we need Mother's Day? Or why do we need to celebrate birthdays? We have to be intentional about many things. Even though we do things every day to honor our mothers, we need to set aside, I believe, one day and be very intentional about the love that we have for them. Same as Father's Day, birthdays. And so, yes, we need Black History Month. But then we continue to celebrate and recognize these contributions every single day.
I really love that comparison. And that's the first time I've actually heard someone kind of compare it to Mother's Day and birthdays and things of that nature. So, thank you for that. And what's interesting, I was saying on another podcast, part of what our organization does is we have a construction operation that we do. And we had some Black gentlemen on the roof, doing some commercial roofing. And I asked them, what did Black history mean to them? And they talked about it a little bit. And then I just kind of articulated on it and just talked about the importance of Black history from a present standpoint. And one of our board members, Raymond, talks about giving people their flowers while they're still here and not after they're dead. And so really acknowledging the folks that are continuing on the mantle and making those gains currently, and how it's important to not only look at our past, we need to know our history, and we don't know our history, unfortunately. Black Americans or Americans in general don't know Black history, which is also American history. But we do need to focus on our present, because with our past and our present, that is going to shape our future. And so it's terribly important for us to do that and really have a focal point on that. And so I've been doing a series where every few days I'll talk about more obscure inventors that people don't know about. The gentleman that made the Super Soaker or home security systems. And I mean, just amazing folks. And when you think about, Black Lives Matter, and not the organization, but the words behind it, every life is very precious. And most of these folks made these inventions based on a need that they saw, right? Putting the yellow light in a stoplight because he saw a car accident, right? And now we have that. Well, if that man wasn't there, then that invention may not come to be. And just all of these, profound things. And those folks didn't have to be here for whatever reason or another, but that greatness is in all of us. That potential is there. But if our lives aren't here, then we may not ever, realize that potential and give something to humanity.
Hey, the one thing that I like to hold up for us to be mindful of is that Carter G. Woodson had the courage to initiate. So, and it probably came from a vision that he had. I don't know, but he had the courage to initiate. And so, what I say to young people today and to everybody really is have the courage to initiate. But we have been taught in our schools and in all of the things that we do pretty much is that we cannot do anything alone, that we always have to have somebody there with us.
Mm-hmm.
But there has to be somebody who will initiate something. And then you bring people along to help you bring that vision or that idea to fruition. But it's okay. It takes courage to go ahead. And if you've got something in your heart, don't stand back in fear for what you think people might say, or that, oh, it might not work or whatever. Go ahead and take that step out on faith and initiate. That's what I say. Initiate.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Don't just sit back, because if you sit back because of fright or whatever it is that makes you sit back, you can bet your bottom dollar that in due time, that idea that you had germinating in your heart and soul,
mm-hmm.
somebody else is going to do it out there. Somebody else is going to do it. And you're going to say to yourself, oh, that's what I had in my mind to do.
Mm-hmm. You know what's
How many times has that happened? I mean, it's happened to me.
Reverend Hall, that used to happen to me in school all the time. I was a very shy person, growing up in school. And I would either have the answer or a thought, and someone else would raise their hand, or the teacher would, expound upon, a thought or an idea. And I'm like, oh, that's what I was thinking. But I was too shy to say it,
Yeah.
But it was nice because it gives you that validation. Everyone, we are here with Reverend Hall in our first ever of our interview series. This series is centered around Black history because it is February, but it's also centered around, current issues and events and, bringing folks together. There's a lot of different moving pieces here as we are the conduit. And the conduit is a conduit for, the generations past, the generations present, and the generations future, seeing and comparing and contrasting our differences and our similarities, taking the knowledge from previous generations and gaining that knowledge and using that knowledge to continue to build in our community. Reverend Hall, what I wanted to ask you too was, I think some of the reasons why we don't do it kind of collectively, and you only see a few people kind of pop out here and there, is, Ali was vilified, in the time of him, rejecting the Vietnam War and some of the other things that were going on. Now he's revered and honored. King was assassinated, Malcolm was assassinated. But now, they're held up by the dominant society and the society at large as being, thought provokers and change agents. And I think that's a lot to do with why we don't see people kind of stand up and step out and voice their thought or their opinion, because it gets, it just gets smashed down so quickly. And whether it's by, let's say the dominant society, or whatever the prevailing thought is, but sometimes it's even our own folks that will do that. So how do we go forward knowing, especially with cancel culture today, right? If you say something that's unpopular, you're done. I mean, it could be your job, your livelihood, your friends, your family. It's really hard for folks to kind of stand out there with the current climate.
So there was a little noise in the background. What did you just ask me a question relative to that?
Yeah, my question is just build on, what folks can do. Because a lot of times we say, okay, you just need to be bold and do it. But, there are some pretty hard consequences, even with me putting out the questions that you saw. What do you think about $15 minimum wage? What do you think about vaccines? What do you think about Black history? Some of our white brothers and sisters are like, well, you know what? I'm not going to talk about Black history because I could get attacked by black folks were saying something wrong, and it's like, but black history is American history, but you understand that there are potential consequences for speaking up. So what kind of words of encouragement, just kind of build on what you were saying more as far as what they can do and how they can let their voices be heard?
Well, Marwan, the only way that I can answer that question is to take it to a spiritual level, okay?
I like it.
And so going back to more years ago than I can fathom, when God said to Isaiah, whom shall I send and who will go for me? And Isaiah responded, here I am, Lord, send me. Mm-hmm. And then going back again to even Moses and Jeremiah said, but I don't know what to say. And the Spirit said, I will put the words in your mouth. I will do it. So for me, it's all about trusting and having that faith and belief that you are not out there by yourself. And yes, there will be sacrifices and suffering, but then the answer to that question is, why not me? Mm-hmm. Somebody has to take the initiative. So when I raised my hand and said, here I am, send me, I didn't say, but only send me to safe places or only send me over here or don't send me over there. I said, here I am, send me. So that's how I respond to that question. And for me, it just goes back to the faith that I have been able to enjoy and become engaged in and to understand more and more. So that's, you just have to take those risks sometimes and just have the faith and belief that you're covered.
And what I'm taking from listening to you is it really doesn't matter if you're religious or if you're spiritual. What you're doing is you're going by faith. Mm-hmm. And, faith without action is dead. Is that kind of how it goes? If you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And we talk about faith as this kind of abstract thing, but we don't always put it into practice. And so if we are faithful, either spiritually or religiously, then it is time for us to go out and step out on faith and to do that. And by doing that, then you also believe that what's going to be is going to be in the best interest, serving whatever that it is in service of. And also like-minded people are probably sitting in the classroom just like me, too afraid to say, this is what it is. And you'll find that people will gather and flock to you and build and elevate and, kind of put it forward.
Yeah, I guess maybe too, it's just developing that belief and that confidence within yourself that, there's a person out there with what do you call it, who is a scab, let's say a scab, mm-hmm. and there's a strike going on. And so you have the belief within yourself that if you become a scab, that you're doing something that's not only going to benefit you, but that it's going to benefit more than you.
Right.
So
absolutely.
It's just having that deep and abiding courage, and it's faith, that I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does to me, and I really do believe that people need to hear it. You and I were speaking a little bit yesterday about folks coming forward and kind of the purpose of this channel being a conduit for those that don't have a voice, for ideas that are counter to what the main ideas that are out there, and to be that platform so people can get their ideas, and great ideas solutions to problems that we've been asking over and over again. If you just, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And so maybe you need to go to the people and ask them, what do you think? How could we solve this? What else should we try? Because the solution is probably there. And that's kind of the whole spirit of looking at Black history and celebrating those folks that dared to step out and invent, speak up, have social justice, and knowing what it was going to take for them and the price that they were going to have to pay at the end of the day. So I think it's just really powerful for you to articulate that. So thank you.
Just going back to faith again, Marwan, I used to, when I was in seminary a few years ago, I had to present a reflection on why I believe. I think that was it. And so what I said very briefly was, when I was a new Christian, is that I am just naive enough to believe that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, or I am just naive enough to believe X, Y, and Z. But as I grew in my faith and in my everyday experiences and saw what was happening and how God was stepping into my life and actually picking me up and carrying me, I became, I was then able to say, I am not naive enough, but it is my faith that allows me to believe that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So it's life's experiences that allow you to grow out of that naivete into that deeper faith.
Absolutely.
If that makes any sense.
Yes, absolutely it does to me. And I would assume that it does to many that are listening to us now. Again, this is Reverend LeVerne Hall. This is the Conduit. We're going to go on to our next question. You ready for it?
I guess it depends on what it is.
Well, you know that homelessness is a big issue in our country. We've got, and it's everywhere right now. We've got issues in Seattle that we know of. We've got our encampments that you see under the freeways and things of that nature. We have our issues out here in Kitsap County. We've seen, situations in San Francisco, and this is really nationwide. And as the big deep freeze kind of came across the East Coast, we've had lots of people that passed away because of the weather conditions, either in their car or being outside. And then when you look at COVID, we also have Texas that, is without power and folks are suffering, right? And it's inhumane to have people outside in the cold. And then, furthermore, where we have COVID now, we already had a homelessness issue in this country prior to COVID. But now during COVID, we see the homeless numbers growing. And then once these moratoriums on eviction are lifted, we may see the numbers increase even more. So what are your thoughts on some things that maybe we could do to reduce homelessness, or what are things that we should consider?
Well, one of the ways that I look at issues, any issues, is just stepping back, whether it be COVID, homelessness, hunger, being incarcerated, whatever the issue is, I need to step back and say to myself, there go I, but for the grace of God. Okay, there go I, but for the grace of God. I could be in any one of those situations. So then I can begin to look at how to step out of my area of comfort to begin to look at possible solutions. What do we do? How do we do that? Should we do this or should we do something else? um, realizing, of course, that everybody will not be coming at it from that point of view. There go I, but for the grace of God. And so again, stepping out on faith, being bold and being courageous, and finding like-minded people that God will put in front of you if that is a particular issue that God wants you to respond to.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we cannot be all things to all people. We can't. And so we just have to look at the sphere of influence that God has placed us in. And so maybe my issue is those who are incarcerated. Maybe my issue is, and I don't like the word issue, is working with those who are going through death and dying and that grieving experience. And maybe yours is something else. And so we have to work within the sphere of influence that God has placed us in, realizing that the life that we live is our prayer and is our sermon. Now, I don't know that, to me, this is how I look at things, realizing that I just cannot be all things to all people. And that's not what God wants me to be, because I'm not God. You're not God.
Right.
And so we have to work within the parameters that God has placed us in. Now, maybe I like to look at some situations as myself being a way station, okay? Because I'm too old to march. I'm too old to do quite a number of active kinds of things, but I can be a way station in that my prayers can go where it is I cannot go.
And additionally, you are, a fountain of experience, wisdom, and knowledge that, if you are seeing yourself as a way station, or as I call myself, a conduit, that people can come and be fed and take that and push it forward and move on. So,
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like, just a way station. Yeah.
So the way I'm kind of taking that is our leadership, if they were to, and not saying that they don't do this, but for those that may have gotten caught up in the bureaucracy of, the political arena, if they kind of shift and look at, seeing people as people, as you were saying, before, that might actually develop some solutions, then just kind of, well, we can't do this because this is how the policy or the procedure is said, and we can't do that. But just really just having a paradigm shift on how they go about doing the work that they're doing. And again, I'm not trying to blanket say that they're not doing that, because I'm sure that, some people are being, very spiritual or going on faith and looking at it from that aspect. But us also going forward and doing that. It's interesting that you bring up that you can't be all things to all people. When we started Gather Together, Grow Together, there were a few things that we knew that we wanted to do. We knew that, folks were hungry. We knew that people were having challenges with transportation. We knew that computer literacy was becoming a really huge issue, as there's a great divide, and we hear stories all the time on how our elderly trying to get the vaccine don't have access to a computer, or if they do, they don't know how to use the computer, and it's high stakes for them to get that vaccine, right? And so they're stressed out. They're spending the entire day trying to figure this out. And now this, some organizations have kind of been created and stepped up to help our seniors to, navigate those, the process to get in there and get the vaccine. And so those are kind of the things, our tenet that we wanted to stand on. And with that, we'll have people come to us all the time and say, you know, you guys should do this and you should do that. And it's like, all
Right.
these things sound great and we would love to. We just can't. We don't have the bandwidth for it, you know. So we got to try to focus on doing the things that we decided to do them as best we can, right? And try to scale those
Right.
things up.
Yes.
So
Yes.
absolutely. And it's hard for people to understand that. It's right. Well, why don't you do this? And it's like, oh, we'd love to do it, but that's, you know, we love animals, but you know, that's not what our mission is, and we don't have the bandwidth to try to help the animals and try to do this and try
Right.
to do that.
And
So
so you can make referrals. You can go to X, Y, and Z to get that kind of help. You know, back in the 60s, I was my first marriage.
mhm.
My husband had ALS, okay, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis,
Mm.
and instantly became a vegetable. I mean,
Wow.
there wasn't anything wrong with his mind, but he had to be cared for like he was a baby. And we had two little children. And during that particular time, back in the 60s, there was no such thing as the computer. But I had, and my family had, a real need. We needed financial support. We needed medical support. We needed everything. And so what we had was a great big thick telephone book. Okay. And so I knew that there was help out there somewhere
Mm-hmm.
for me and my family and my husband, who was dying every day.
Mm.
So it was literally allowing my fingers to walk through the yellow pages,
Mm-hmm.
pick up the telephone and call and say, can you do this? What, you can't do that? What can you point me in another direction? And so, in answer to your question, that is, we have all of these mechanisms and avenues in front of us today, so that we don't have to allow our fingers to do the walking through the yellow pages. But we can, as you say, your conduit, you can refer people to other places, because you just can't be all things to all people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
But yes, you can be the connector, which is tremendously important, because, you know, I think folks oftentimes will take for granted. There are a lot of great organizations and folks that are doing things out there for the community, but everyone doesn't know about it. And if I haven't
That's
needed
it,
that,
exactly.
and that
That's
wasn't my
right.
life, I have no idea where to start or where to go. So it's
Mhm.
really powerful. We do need those folks that can refer.
So we can, going back to this way station concept,
Mm-hmm.
is that we can uh, we can become rather fluent in the resources that are available, knowing that in your position and in my position as a minister, we also have to look upon ourselves as being a first responders, because in some instances, people are going to come to you before they come to anybody else.
Right.
And so rather than say, well, I don't know what to do to help you, you have a yellow book, a telephone book in your head or in that computer, and you can, in a sense, give some direction and guidance if you choose to look upon yourself as a first responder.
You know, what's powerful about that too is, you know, you don't have to be a part of an organization to do that, right? If you've had some
Right.
experiences and you've gone through something, then, you know, I don't have a family member or a loved one that's gone through ALS. Is that the acronym?
Right.
But now you've got some experiences that if someone else experiences that, you're able to provide some information and some resources on how they may go about getting help, or some things that they're not even, they're in crisis mode, right? And they don't
Right.
even know what to consider, and just kind of pass those things on, and talk about self-care while you're going through it, and telling yourself to give yourself grace and to breathe, and just some of those things that they're, I need help right now. I don't know where to go. I'm lost. And so that's powerful. So my thing is about empowering people and letting them know that they have a locus of control. Maybe they can't control the situation. You couldn't control your husband's condition, but you can control what you did and how you responded to it, and take power over it to the ability that you can. And that's, I think, a lot of folks today, young and old, kind of need that encouragement and reminder that they are powerful, and they just have to use the power that they have to navigate around the situations that are in front of them.
Sometimes the most powerful thing that you have going for you is the ability, the capacity to listen, because many times all people want is for somebody to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So just being able to listen.
Wholeheartedly agree with that. And acknowledging people's existence.
Right.
Smile, speak.
Yes.
The East Coast, they talk about how, some of the experiences. Oh, I go to the East Coast and you look at people and they just kind of give you this mean look and they won't even acknowledge you. And, just everyone's so standoffish. And it's like, that actually happens here a lot too, and I'll walk down the street and just say, hey, how you doing? And someone will look at you like, well, you speaking to me? Like, why would you talk to me? It's like, I'm just acknowledging that you're there, how you doing? And just kind of keep it
that is so true, because I moved to Seattle, Washington in 1959. And I had a 6-month-old baby,
mm-hmm.
And of course my husband. And we lived in Rainier Vista.
Oh yeah.
Rainier Vista. And so many times I would put my baby in the stroller and we would walk down to Columbia City.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not knowing anybody in Seattle, Washington, I would pass Black people. And because where I came from, you always acknowledged each other. I don't care who you were or what you were, mm-hmm. You acknowledged each other. That was my experience. I would acknowledge people who looked like me. Mm-hmm. And they would not respond at all. And it still happens to this day.
It still happens to this day.
I think about my distinguished contemporary ancestor, Sojourner Truth, mm-hmm. in that she was a very tall woman. She was very dark. And people said that she wasn't pretty. She looked like her dad. Mm. She looked like a man. Mm. And she spoke a broken English, not because she didn't know any better, but her first language was Dutch.
Oh, wow.
That's where she grew up, with the Dutch slave masters. So that's why she spoke a broken English. And so her own people who looked like her, the same color as her, would laugh at her and say that she was dumb, mm-hmm. And so and that still goes on today.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it still goes on today. Yeah. Yes, I just had to kind of throw that little bit in about my distinguished contemporary ancestor and mentor.
Oh, you're giving us that Black history. I didn't know that Sojourner Truth, first language was Dutch.
Yeah. So it was that she was born in upstate New York. Yeah, up in Ulster County. Yeah.
I know for those of you in the chat, type in there if you knew that or not. Like I said, Black history, just nuggets of information. We are here with Reverend LeVerne Hall. This is the Conduit. We're so thankful that she was able to join us today and spend some time with us. Let's go ahead and move on to our next question. So, what do you think about the $15 minimum wage? And I know you said you didn't have a lot of knowledge on this subject, but I did want to know just kind of what your thoughts are. Seattle is one of the cities that kind of pushed through, and they're kind of there. But, the Biden administration, some of the campaigns that they kind of ran on was talking about, giving a livable wage to folks and trying to get folks to $15 minimum wage. Little backstory on that is if they did go forward with that, and we don't know what's going to happen right now, this wouldn't even be phased in until 2025. So, the federal minimum wage is still like $7.25, and just depending on where you are in the nation. But $15 an hour, when you think about it, and just a little quick math for everyone listening, if you're working a 40-hour job, 15 times 40 is $600 a week. You multiply that by 2, you get $1,200. You multiply that by 4 for the 4 weeks, then you have $2,400. So if you multiply that by 0.8, which is 80%, you're going to pay about 20% taxes for your FICA and your unemployment and everything, your taxes and all that. You're going to take home about $1,900 a month. And then when you look at the fact that, a one bedroom, even if you're by yourself, it's about $1,000 to $1,100 a month. $12,000 or $1,000 of that $1,900 is gone right off the top. You got food, you've got utilities, you got a phone. If you have a car, you've got, you might have a car payment, you've got repair, you've got insurance, you've got the toll if you've got to go over the bridge, you've got fuel. If you're on the bus, you've got your bus pass, but there is a cost that's associated with time, right? You've got health care, you might have child care, you need toiletries, you need, cleaning supplies, laundry supplies. And so once you put it all together, there's no money left and you're already running a deficit. Oh, and then you also need to save for your retirement, right? So what are your thoughts on that? And if you want to talk about, Social Security or some other forms of how people are living and just what the impact is, please go right ahead.
Well, I have to go back to what I said a while ago. There go I, but for the grace of God. There go I, but for the grace of God. $15 an hour ain't enough. Mm-hmm. It ain't enough. I'm going to go back again to the 1960s when I had the responsibility of a dying husband who was in his 20s, wow. two little babies, okay, had just started buying a house in Montlake. And then all of this comes crashing down, okay? So I had to go on welfare, which is something that I had not been accustomed to. Now, this is what welfare did. Remember, there's a sick husband who is dying, and 2 little babies, and myself. Mm-hmm. Welfare said, oh, yes, we will help you. They helped us to the tune of $194 a month. Mm. And then threatened me and said, if anybody gives you anything to help you, even if it's a pair of shoes for one of your babies, or if it's 2 cents or whatever it is, we will deduct that from your $194 a month. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Right.
So that's, you have to, when you've been there and you have learned how to step outside of that box that they put you in, because actually one of the things that they did and what they do is to teach people how to lie, cheat, and steal. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's what they are pushing people into doing, is lying, cheating, and stealing. So I don't know what to do about it, but I do know $15 ain't enough.
Two things I want to talk about is one, what um people that aren't in support will often say, well, people on welfare, they don't want to work and they're lazy and, that's, they just need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and go ahead and do the work. And here you're telling a story from years back on how that wasn't the case, right? And it was good that that safety net was there, but that safety net was almost not a net, but a snare. It put you in
That's
this,
it, right?
put you in a place where it's like you are stuck in place and it's not enough to help you to propel yourself out. It keeps you barely surviving and hanging on, and all the while you got people that don't support it attacking you and saying that you're lazy and this doesn't help anyone and this and that. And really what it is it's actually not adequate support. And in the
And realizing that I was not the only person in that situation.
mm-hmm.
Most people who have to resort to welfare and assistance and help desperately need it. Right. There will always be people who will abuse the system,
mm-hmm.
but for the most part, people are there because they have to be there. And you know what, Mormon? I'm going to tell you what I did.
Yes, ma'am.
I became very proficient in lying, cheating,
mm-hmm.
and stealing.
Mm-hmm. Because that's how they
did.
That's how they set the definition.
In order to take care of what I had on my table. Mm-hmm. Yes, when it was dark, and here I was living in this house with these two babies and a sick husband, somebody would knock on my door. And me being young, I wasn't even 30 years old. Mm-hmm. I would go and open my door, and it could have been anybody, but there would be somebody there with a box full of food, a bag of clothes, and an envelope that had cash money in it, mm-hmm. because they had heard about us. And so, yes, I lied about receiving that. Mm-hmm. I cheated by taking what God had sent to me, or I stole it. Yeah, I did. I was pushed into that, and I make no bones, no excuses about it. And there are people right now today who are living that same story.
We work with them on a daily basis, Reverend Hall. We really do. And the way the system is currently operating now, let's say that someone is receiving TANF or EBT or Social Security or things of that nature. What happens is like you said, they have to report what comes in. And even if they take a little, part-time job, all of a sudden they start diminishing their food stamps. So it's forced to keep them at the same level. They pat themselves on the back and say, hey, look, we got someone off of food stamps. They're working now, but they're in the same trap because you've decreased it or you've canceled it, and now they're in the same space. So they're treading the same water in a different way. They're not getting ahead, and only a few are able to truly escape it and then move forward and then hopefully break the cycle of poverty for their children and their children's children.
Let me share something else that they did to me back then. You're just making me think of all kinds of things, okay?
I'm sorry.
I grew up reading newspapers every day, okay? Mm-hmm. So naturally, when I became an adult with my own family, I continued to read newspapers. There was a story on the front page of either I think it was the PI back then, or the Seattle, whatever newspaper it was. But there was a picture of a young white girl on the front page, and her story was kind of similar to mine. She had met with some bad circumstances. So welfare paid for her babysitter and paid for her to go back to school and get an education so that she could become a self-supporting, okay? So when I saw that story, I said, oh, well, maybe they'll do the same thing for me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I pick up the phone and I call my quote caseworker. And of course, they could not do that for me because of X, Y, and Z. I don't remember everything they told me, but they could not do the same thing for me that they did for that other person. And that still exists today. Of course, we know that.
Well, it does, and it exists, from a systemic viewpoint, but it also exists just kind of as a matter of fact. And what I want folks to kind of take from this part of the conversation is this. Reverend Hall talked about a circle of influence, right? And I talk about a circle of support. You have to establish a circle of support. If you don't have one, we have toxic relationships that we're trying to escape. We have toxic family members that we can't really, deal with because they bring us down, and it's not a safe environment for us either physically or mentally. But you have got to have the power of discernment, get out there and start creating your own circles of support, because you're going to need that. And here during this time of COVID, we don't know how long this is going to last. We're talking about mutations and this, that, and the other. There are food shortages throughout the country. There's job shortages. There's a housing crisis. We have all of these things. And if you are going to survive, there's only so much of the pie to go around, and they're very tight with that pie. And even that piece that you get isn't enough. So we are going to have to pull together and network and pool our resources and our experiences. Maybe you're going to go ahead and watch, 3 or 4 families' children while these folks go out and go to the food banks or do whatever. You've got a car, but I know how to repair things, and really kind of build on those relationships and create your own ecosystem of support. I would say a lost art. When I was a kid, there were people on the block that could discipline us. Even if my dad wasn't around, we were safe, and he knew that we were safe. And Miss Johnson would get after us, so it was, and you might get whooped twice because she could whoop you. She had, my principal in the 3rd grade was Ora Franklin, and she had a paddle with holes in it, and it whistled when she hit you with it. And I only got paddled once by Mrs. Franklin, but when I got home, I got another paddling. But that was that circle of community that Dad had established to where we were going to be safe in the different arenas that we found ourselves in, where he couldn't be present to watch over us. And so I think that's really important because, again, the whole locus of control argument is we can't change the system as it's set right now today, but what we can do is create those support systems around us. And we have to be proactive in not only creating them, but we also have to cultivate those relationships too. We can't allow them to wither and erode and atrophy. We do have to maintain those relationships. Would you agree with that?
Hillary Clinton wrote a book, and she titled that book, "It Takes a Village to Raise a Child." Okay? But Hillary Clinton didn't come up with that title herself. That is an old African proverb. It takes a village to raise a child.
Yes, ma'am.
And so there are some things that we really have to hold dear to and follow what is our tradition, and not stray too far away from our traditions. And yes, it does take a village to raise a child. I know growing up back in the 1940s and the 1950s, we didn't have telephones then. If they did have them, we couldn't afford a telephone, okay?
Right.
But if we did something 2 blocks away from the house, by the time we got home, our folks knew about it. And so maybe it was that spiritual African drumming that got through to them to tell them what Miss So-and-so saw us doing in front of her house. But yes, we do have to, and I say recapture those traditions.
Absolutely.
We are the yellow pages. We are the yellow pages.
All right now. I like it. I like it. Let me ask you a hard question that may be difficult to answer. In this day and age, we have been so fractured in our relationships for the different, opinions that, we view, and how, society has really kind of pitted us against each other in so many different ways. And there are some dangerous folks out there. So what advice would you give to someone who is trying to establish a circle of support that is healthy? How do they gain that power of discernment to figure out whether or not these are good folks that they're interacting with? You have any thoughts on that, on what they could do?
Well, one of the things, and I just have to keep going back to when I grew up, and even when I moved here to Seattle, Washington, one of the first things that I did was to join a family of faith, to join a church. Many people, a lot of people, some people will only come to church when they need something, like my experience when I was working in the church office was once a month we would see some of the same people who would come because they needed some food, but they would never come other times to try and develop those relationships to really truly make it a village,
Right.
And so one of the things that I would suggest, strongly suggest, is finding a church of your choice that you can become a family member of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And you just have to start, definitely trust, but verify, get to know folks, take some time. I'm not saying meet someone on the street tomorrow and then leave your kids with them, but, you do need to get to know people, understand what your values are, and then look for those attributes, not only in what they say, but in what they do. So, someone can present, let's say, as a great parent and whatnot, and they could tell you all the same things. I'm spiritual, or I'm religious, I'm a Christian, and this is how I feel, and I might even spare the rod or spoil the child, whatever it is that they espouse, and it may sound good, but you need to watch for a while and see, is that truly what it is that they're about, or if it isn't. And there's a saying that says that people will show you who they are if you just give them enough time. So,
and you have to believe it. You have to believe it.
You do have to believe it, right?
One of the other areas too, Marwan, is your neighborhood, where you live, your neighbors. Get to know your neighbors. And here again, I have to go back to my growing up back in Portland. Mother and the neighbor women, the women in the neighborhood, they would congregate at each other's houses, sit around the kitchen table and drink tea, coffee, whatever. But we knew each other, Yeah.
And I'm gonna say something that for all of the folks that are not intellectually honest and just kind of attack the messenger, there are ways where someone who is not necessarily a good person has done some evil things, and I'm talking about our former president, President Trump. When his tagline was "Make America Great Again," Black Americans and many other demographics and folks were like, well, what do you mean? You want to go back to slavery times? Do you want to go back to, Jim Crow, redlining, whatever it was, right? And it was just an attack. But part of that is, and it was like, well, when was Black America ever good, in America? Well, there are things that worked more effectively and more efficiently.
Yes,
and for me, that was one of those things, right? Is, back during that time, we did have more a sense of community. and folks watched out for each other's
Okay,
children.
he's here.
And so when you
He's
think
here.
about latchkey children, and
Yeah,
the
he's
parent
here.
is
Are you
out at
in the
work
church?
and they can't be home and the kids have to be there, that there didn't necessarily need to be an adult in the house, but there were
Well,
people in the
yeah,
neighborhood that were
he's.
adults that were
I
staying,
think
that were
he's
at
here at the
home,
church.
that could
I'm
watch
in a
over,
kind of a
and
meet,
they
and
could call on and
I'll
just make sure
I'll
that
let him
everything
in
was
so I
good.
can go I can
And
find
so
and have him
when you
call
think
you.
about some of the things and how our folks persevered and how resilient we were back then, I think many of us would agree
His
that
cell number.
they
Yeah,
technically had
call
it, or
it.
technically
Okay,
they had it
thanks.
harder
All right.
than we did, right? And we stand on their shoulders. So how did they make it to this time? Our relationships were stronger back then. We had the strongest marriage rates in the black community in the past, right? And some of that has eroded. And so when that tagline of Make America Great Again, you can take it to be whatever you want it to mean. But there are some instances, and I think there are several instances where that is actually accurate, and we do need to go back to some of those things, right? Where we're listening to our grandparents or our great grandparents tell stories and teach us things, telling us, the stories of how it used to be and what they went through and how they, banded together and how they were able to, make it. And oftentimes families had way more kids than we have now, but somehow they still
Mm-hmm.
were able to grow and thrive and be pretty happy during some of the most violent times in American history through the civil rights era. So, I just want us to be open minded, expand our mind, and not just be hyperbolic and reactive to certain things that we hear and say, you know what? Yeah, he's saying make America great again. We have no idea what that means. Does he want to go and put, Klan sheets on and burn crosses in people's yards? No, I don't think that is what he's saying. But there are pieces that we can pick out of that says, you know what? Yes, we were a lot more resilient back then. We were more together as a people back then, and we had a support system of folks. And there were troublemakers and rabble rousers and bad people that existed back then in our community,
Mm-hmm.
but we knew who they were because we had a bigger communication network that was set up. So you knew who to stay away from, right? And you knew who
Right.
you can interact with, right? But now we don't know. We're just kind of walking around, and you just kind of pray that you come back safe and your kids come back safe wherever they may be. So I think that's really important, and we need to hear these stories, right? How did you get through, the civil rights time? How did you get through, marching, back then? And you see that we're doing it again today. And how did they make gains? How did they maintain? What did you do after the marching was over? Right now, it's pretty quiet. What's happening? George Floyd, he dies on TV. Everyone sees it. The nation marches, the world marches, everything goes crazy for a little while. And it's all during the pandemic and nothing was going on. But now all that momentum seems to have kind of gone away. Do we even talk about it now?
Well, it's just going back to what our tradition is. When you talk about that phrase, "Make America Great Again."
Mm-hmm.
So within your sphere of influence, within your circle of support, how do you take that phrase and make it work for those that you have in your circle, in your bubble? Because what you have in your bubble and what you do in your bubble is going to affect what's outside of your bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And it could possibly, and it would have an exponential effect.
I love it.
Because when you touch somebody, that person is going to touch somebody, then that person is going to touch 3 or 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to really take a look at that quote village,
Mm-hmm.
that circle, and do what you believe, what thus has said the Lord to you to do with what you have, with what God has entrusted and put in your hands.
And you're telling people that people are powerful, that they have a locus of control that they can exercise in their environment. And it just starts
Right.
with themselves daring to not just talk about how bad things are or how someone should change something or this, that, and the other, but that they can actually do it. Meet your neighbor next door. Make that establishment. If it's not that neighbor, meet the other neighbor. But one of those neighbors is probably going to be someone that has some like-minded things that you have in common, and you can work with them on whatever it may be. And
That's it.
because it's a village, everyone isn't going to be the same thing. This person is a mechanic. This person has transportation. This one has mentorship. This one has,
Right.
and you pull those things together. And then, like you said, that's a ripple effect, right? It changes people.
Yeah.
So
And we all know that Miss Laura, Miss So and So's son is deviant. We know that. We know him.
Yep.
We know it. We know him, but we love him, and we know that boy is going to end up in jail. But you know what? That boy is coming back home one day too, probably.
My
And
dad
he
had
has
to
to come back to that bubble where we love him and we know who he is.
Yep. My dad
We
had
can't
to.
keep him from coming back into the bubble
Yep. My
because you've got the conduit.
oh, there you go. There you go. But you know, my dad had to meet my parents, my friend's parents, right, before I could go over and spend any time, right? It wasn't just a phone conversation. He wanted to meet them, right?
Right.
And you know, a 5-minute conversation can tell you a lot. And
Right.
I would be so mad at my dad, Rev Hall, because he'd meet some of the parents, and it's like, yeah, no, son, you won't be going over there. I'm like, come on, Dad, it's my friend. You don't understand. Like, no, But that was important. That was important.
Right.
And we don't do that now, right?
No.
Let me just read some of the chats because we do have people that are listening to us and they are responding. So we have Rob Dent that is saying, it feels like they want you to fail and stay on support. So that was in response to our conversation on kind of welfare and the system.
Right.
And he says, if you work 20 hours a week at minimum wage, they cut your EBT in half, which is your food stamps, so you can never get ahead. And then we have Shaylin Houston, who says, this conversation is feeding my soul and mind. And she also says, everything being said is so powerful and enlightening. When the truth is told, you feel something in your spirit. Thank you for sharing in this capacity. Thank you for making Black history! !
Well, can we just go back to Black history for just a minute?
Yes, ma'am.
Marwan, and we always talk about Black history and what it is, but I say this to everybody who is listening: if you want your history recorded as it should be, then you need to write it. Do not allow somebody else to write your history, because they will do one of several things, or all of these things. They will record it the way they want to record it. They will leave stuff out. They'll paint it as another kind of a picture. And so we cannot pass that responsibility to somebody else who does not love you. So you have got to write your own history, even if it means that you're just jotting little notes down on pieces of paper and sticking them in your Bible, or just doing whatever, but just write it down so that your people in that village will know. And a few years ago, when I had my 80th birthday, the gift that I gave to my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren was something that is very simple, that is could only come from me. We were all gathered together, and I said to them, this is my birthday gift to each one of you. From this day forward, you can ask me, your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, and my sisters were there, my sisters, ask me anything you want to know about me, and I will tell you the truth. And in this way, after I have checked out of here, you won't have to sit and wonder, I wish that I had asked her this, or I wonder what she did about that, or how did she feel about X, Y, and Z. And so I repeat that to them every single year as my gift to them. Ask me whatever it is you want to ask me. Mm-hmm. And then a part of that I have tried to get from one of my distinguished contemporary ancestors, Mary McLeod Bethune, mm-hmm. in her last will and testament. She didn't say, I'm leaving you my house or I'm leaving you all of my jewelry. She had paragraphs and she says, I leave you faith. And then she'd write what she felt about faith. I leave you a thirst for education. And then she would put her thoughts down about that. And then she said, I leave you a respect for each other. And she had about 7 or 8 different points that she emphasized in her last will and testament. And that to me is more valuable than this piece of junk jewelry that I got on. You know?
Yes, ma'am.
That's going to be at somebody's Goodwill after I'm gone. You know? Mm-hmm. Right. So write it down, document it yourself, and talk to your children. I know one more thing, Marwan. When I worked in the church office at Mount Zion, you may remember Mother Mabel.
I do.
Okay, I would open the church office up on Sundays. Mother Mabel, after church, would come into the church office, pull up a chair in front of me, and she would say, baby, there is so much that I need to tell you. There's so much that I want to talk to you about. She said, I just got so much I want you to know. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And shortly after that, Mother Mabel passed away. But she had this thirst burning in her that she wanted to talk. She wanted to tell somebody. She had so much that she wanted to leave here. And so one of the things that we cannot do as a people is bury their words, their thoughts, and their deeds with them. Mm-hmm. As much as we can, and this is how we celebrate Black history every day, is by remembering what we were taught and then manifesting those. We are living Proverbs. Okay? Yes, and our ancestors are speaking to their future, which is us, in the present. If that makes any sense. Sometimes I don't make too much sense.
Reverend Hall, it doesn't only make sense, it's powerful. It really is powerful. And, you know, our generation has started to kind of fall away from that, right? Where we, you know, and all generations are kind of like that, right? We know better. We're young. You're old. You don't know. This isn't how things are anymore. So you're out of touch. I used to tell my dad that all the time when he would tell me, you know, oh, you should go into teaching, son. I think you'd be a good teacher. It's like, no, Dad, I'm not. I don't want to be a teacher. I'm not going into the school. I hear you talk about it. It ain't happening, right? They said, well, I don't know, son. And he would never tell me, yeah, okay. He would just say, I don't know, son. It was like he knew something that I didn't know. Uh-huh. And I summarily rejected it, Reverend Hall. I'm not going to become a teacher. That's it. And you couldn't have told me, someone who only finished the 9th grade and got his GED 2 days after his 16th birthday, that I would be teaching on the college level, in 2012, right? And it's like, well, Dad, you were right.
Right.
But I'm not going to become a preacher. That ain't going to happen. I'm not going to be Reverend Cameron.
But you see, what we don't realize, what we fail to understand is that now see, just that quickly, I lost my thought. I lost it. That's age. I lost my thought.
Well, first off, you look fantastic because when you said I was 80 a few years ago, I'm like, how old is Reverend Hall? I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't think you were 80. He was like, I was 80 a few years ago. I'm like, well, go ahead then.
Well, listen, I am very, very, very proud of my age. And I will tell you, this is February.
Mm-hmm.
Last month, January, I had my 83rd birthday, number 83.
Happy 83rd birthday, Reverend Hall. You look
Yes.
fantastic and vibrant. And I can only hope that I have the mental faculty at 83 if I'm blessed to see 83. And thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your wisdom with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. But you know what? And I have to applaud you for what you're doing, having these conversations. And I just hope that you just continue to do it, because the more people, individuals talk about themselves and the experiences that they have had, it helps them to become more aware of who it is God has created them to be.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't talk about who you are and what your experiences have been, you really aren't growing that much, I think.
Yes, ma'am.
But every time I have these conversations, something a little bit more is revealed to me about who it is I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that a lot of people don't like me. I know that.
Then that means that you're going on the right path.
But so what? I don't like a lot of
people. Ain't that something? People like, I don't like you. What makes you think I like you?
You don't like me because of what you heard somebody else say who didn't even know me. Facts. And so that tells me that you don't know who you are. Okay.
Facts. Reverend Hall bringing the receipts today.
It's all good. It's fun. I just enjoy so much being on the face of this earth, in spite of and despite all of the stuff. And I choose not to call the stuff problems,
mm-hmm.
because when you identify something as a problem, it limits your thinking. It limits your thinking. You begin to think in a tunnel vision. But looking at something as a challenge, I think it kind of opens you up to be a little more creative in your thought processes and different ways that you begin to use some of the creativity that God breathed into you,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Again, we're here with Reverend Hall on the Conduit. We're asking her some questions. We're being imparted with her wisdom, knowledge, and experience. We're so blessed to have her here today, and we thank her. We're going to go on to our next question. And
you mean you got another question?
Oh, I got so many questions. You just tell me if we got to wrap it up. But I mean, I had 10 and we're only on 3. So, clearly we're both very loquacious, but folks are really gaining from it, and it's just really great. But my question for you is how do you define friendship? Because that isn't we kind of touched on it a little bit about talking about creating a circle of influence and a circle of support. But, how do you define friendship? How would you define that?
Oh, how do I define friendship?
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought about that before.
Then that's good.
Yeah, I don't know how I define, I really don't know how I would define friendship. Because it could be, I don't know. I've got to give that some thought. And when I say that I have to give it some thought, I have to give it some spiritual thought, okay? And I think that one of the, within our communication model,
mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why some of us have such a hard time navigating through the stuff that's within our communication model, me and you speaking to each other, is because we're speaking on different levels,
mm-hmm.
okay? I might be speaking to you out of that spiritual level, but you're accepting it on another level. Okay?
All right.
And so, in order for me to answer, even begin to think about that, I've got to kind of put it in a spiritual context, which does not mean that I have to go and do a biblical expose on it or all of that kind of stuff. I just have to go into my sanctuary, the sanctuary of my heart, and do some spiritual thinking about that word friendship and interrogate it and see how it speaks back to me.
So I'm going to modify the question, but first, what I want to point out, and this is what is so powerful, that this isn't even about the question. The lesson here in Rev Hall's response is you do not have to have an answer for everything. Don't feel like you need to be pressured into providing an answer. And what she did there says, hey, look, you know what? Right now, I need to reflect on that. I'm not going to give you some superficial answer that isn't something that I let sit on me, right? We often want to have an answer. We feel pressured in having an answer, and it's okay to say that, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know how I feel about that. Let me give it some thought, and let me get back to you. Be humble. Understand what it is in your scope, in your strength, in your range. That's not my wheelhouse. I don't know. I'm going to sit back and listen. You tell me how you would define friendship. You know, you can flip it. But that is a strength that so many of us don't have because we're trying to save face, right? We don't want to look like we're dumb or we're ignorant or, we don't have something thoughtful to say. So, thank you for being you, because people need to see that and be emboldened by that response, right?
Well, let me tell you this thing. For a time, I was a single parent because my husband passed away just a month or so short of his 33rd birthday. Mm-hmm. So I had these two little boys that I had to raise, okay, mm-hmm. by myself as a little bitty short woman. Okay. And I knew that they were going to get big. Mm-hmm. So I had to say, LeVerne, what are you going to do? So I told them, Marwan, and this is how they grew up, that I knew everything, that I knew what they were thinking before they even thought it, and that I had eyes in the back of my head. So you know what? Don't you dare try anything with me. Because, man, I call him man, I got your behind covered, and it belongs to me, your mama. Mm-hmm.
So I'll tell you a funny story about Dad, right? So, Dad was working on his principalship, so he would work during the day, and then, he had his choir rehearsal and everything else going on. So, he was busy. He worked as a 911 dispatcher while doing his principalship. And, working his day job and still finding time for choir rehearsal and adopting all of us kids and making sure that we're clothed and fed and getting school and getting mental health and all of this stuff, right? It's like, I don't know how you could do it. But, Dad ain't here. And bedtime's 8:30, and we know our butts is supposed to be in bed, but, Knight Rider's on. So we're going to go ahead and watch Knight Rider, and he won't know. Or Dukes of Hazzard or whatever it was, right? Airwolf, Street Hawk, for those of you that are of that age. And Dad would come home. And, we turn the TV off, we get in the bed, we fake snoring, and he would come in, and sometimes he would get our behinds, right? Or we get in some kind of trouble, and we couldn't figure out how he knew we were watching TV. He told me, a few years before he passed, he would come in and just put his hand on the back of the tube TV, and it was warm. We had no idea how he was catching us. And it's like, he must have eyes in the back of his head. There's no cameras. We couldn't figure it out. Right. But he had our number. So it's just one of those things. And you believe that, right? We believe our parents have these supernatural powers.
Right.
And we have no idea how they know. But a lot of that is just wisdom and intelligence and knowing how, kids are going to be and whatnot. But he had his little strategies and tactics, and he kept it a secret.
Right. Well, when my two fellas were, they were like early teenagers. Mm-hmm. And so they had their best buddies. And so they and their best buddies, their mother was one of my friends, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so they were at their house, their best buddy's house one day. And their best buddy's mother was needing to know something about something that she was cooking or doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what my kids told that lady?
What's that?
Oh, just call my mother. She knows everything. She can tell you what to do. So Marie called me and she said, you know what your boys told me? They told me that you knew everything.
Yeah, it's powerful, and it does feel like at the time you probably feel like I don't know hardly anything. I'm just trying to do what I can and survive. But
that's it.
To the minds of babes, you look like the all-seeing and all-knowing oracle for sure.
Right.
So let me flip the question for you. Since you're going to think about how you define friendship, what are some attributes would you say that one should have to be a good friend? What are some of the qualities that you look for in a good friend?
Okay. Being able to listen.
Okay.
Without judgment, without judging. Listen. Being committed, dependable, and gosh, I don't know, but just knowing there are some kids that I grew up with in Portland, rarely do we see each other because they're scattered all over the world, But we just know that if we pick up the telephone and call, we know what the response is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
We know. Yeah. And so we've got this invisible grapevine. And if Charmaine is sick down in California, then we get on that pipeline, that conduit, and we let everybody know, hey, we got to pray for Charmaine. We got to pray for Charmaine. We got to pray so hard that she feels it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's like being not biological brothers and sisters, but sisters and brothers. You know what I mean?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And so sisters and biological sisters and brothers, that's where you have your first fights. That's where you first say, I hate you, But that you stick together. And so that's what this invisible aura that is around the people, the kids that I grew up with in my neighborhood and in the area. We have no geographical boundaries. No matter where it is we are, we know that we are bound together as brothers and sisters. I went into a store in Renton about 2 or 3 years ago, and some teenagers, little black guys that went to the high school, Renton High School, they were in that place acting a mess. They were just acting up, and I looked at them, and it's like, wait a minute, you guys, if these people in here call the police, all of y'all are going to jail, Right. And this one little guy, he had this hat on, and he had it all backwards, and I said, look at you. I said, you don't wear no hat like that at home when you fixing to sit down and eat. I said, turn that hat around. Turn it around and act right. And then one of them said, to me, he said, you know who his daddy is? I said, no, who is his daddy? And he told me who his daddy was. And I said, I know him because you look just like him. And I said, I'm going to tell him what you in here doing. And then I turned and I looked at another one of them little fellas. And I said, and what is your name? And he told me what his name is. This is in Renton. And he told me his name. And I looked at him and I said, I said, I know your grandpa. I said, we grew up together in Portland, Oregon. And I said, is his name so and so and so and so? And do they call him such and such and such and such? He said, yeah. I said, and you know he wouldn't want you up in here acting like that. I said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to call him right as soon as I leave here.
Well,
You know?
and you know what's sad about that is this is kind of what we were talking about. You know, I don't really know too many children that I could see in a Walmart in their early 20s or their 18s or 17s where I could do that and may not find myself in a dangerous situation. Right? And we get further apart from being connected as a community where someone can see your kids out there not doing what they're supposed to do, and you can call them on it, and they will, you know, okay, yes, Reverend Hall, yes, ma'am, and they'll fall back a little bit. But now we can't really do that, and it's not safe to do. And so it's incumbent upon us to not complain about it. We can recognize that it's a problem, but now what are we going to do to change it? Because we have to. If I'm here for another 40 years, if I'm blessed to live as long as you have, then that's my job. That's my responsibility to myself, to the community, to my daughter, to my grandchildren. I have to do that. I don't have a choice in that, and I should want to do that from that perspective. Raymond Pateau says, makes perfect sense. He says, you look great. You look fantastic. And he also says, iron sharpens iron.
That's right.
So, yeah, I think that's awesome. Right now, I don't feel like iron next to you. I feel like, you know, copper. So it's iron sharpens copper.
No. Look, one of the attributes of aging and growing older is that you really have to recognize where you are and who you are. And you have to respect those who are younger than you, because there's something that you can learn from communicating with that person. Mm-hmm. It's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And you know what? I love me some young people. I love to talk to them. I love to be around them. Because I learned so much. Yeah. I don't care if they get anything from me. I'm being selfish. I'm going to get as much as I can from them, because that's what keeps me young.
Well, and you know what? And that's great, too. And when you think about the analogy of the conduit, then the conduit has to be both ways. It doesn't necessarily have to flow in one direction. It can be bidirectional. And so I love that, right? And that's right. The whole thing, giving people a platform to let their voice, their ideas, what's important to them come out, and that is the flow of information in the other direction. So I love you reinforcing that point there.
So just keep me surrounded with some young folk and I'll be all right. I might live to be 160.
That I could do for sure. So I got a good one for you. So one of the questions was, what makes you a good spouse, i.e. significant other? And if you would, since you told your story about your husband passing so young and the things that you had to do, you know, you can either talk about it from your perspective on what you had to do and trying to identify some of those things that made you a good spouse in that, or what made him a good spouse, you know, during the time that you guys were together.
What makes a good, well, I think that it is taking the institution of marriage seriously. And when you say, until death do us part, I took that very seriously. Mm-hmm. And I pray that he took it seriously as well, because if the tables had been turned, would he have taken care of me like I was baby? Mm. And so it just goes back to that conduit again, treating someone else the way that you would like to be treated. And you know what? I mean, how best, I don't know how to explain it. Yeah. Other than what I've just said. Yeah.
Well, you know,
and I was married again.
Oh, really? Okay.
I had a second marriage. And that marriage ended because he became sick as well and
Oh,
died.
wow. Wow.
Okay. So I was caregiver twice
Mm.
and raised two families as a single parent.
Wow.
And so it's like, there go I, but for the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right. Right. But you were blessed to have love twice. And a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah, right. And I have beautiful children to, you know.
Well, you said something before that I haven't heard people talk about or bring up when they talk about, some of the attributes or qualities in friendship. And you talked about commitment, right? And being committed as a friend, not as a spouse right now, right? That kind of
Right.
goes without saying that you have to be committed there. And, everyone says, oh, I want you to be loyal to me. I want you to be able to, not judge me. I'm going to tell you some things and, I don't want you to judge me because then you're not my friend or, you're critical. I get criticism from everywhere else. I just need you to listen to me, as you said, is one of those qualities. But being committed in a friendship, is one that I see people kind of throwing their relationships away so easily, right? You've offended me or you've done something to me and the friendship is over. And it does take both parties to be committed to actually being friends and defining that's, or at least acknowledging that's what we have is a friendship, not an acquaintanceship. And so I really like that. I didn't want to forget to kind of go back on that. And, I know you wouldn't judge me, Reverend Hall. But I'm going to be honest because, I think people need to hear it, with Tiffany's mom, we were together like 15 years, we did everything right. We went to school, and I proposed to her after our bachelor degree, and she said, no, when we finish our master's, then we can get married. So I was like, all right, we'll finish our master's, and that's what we did, and then we bought the house, and then we had Layla, and so we did everything in order, and we had a good run. We were married for about 10 years, but, it fizzled out. And, I live here in Kitsap County, so I'm in a naval town, right? And so I have witnessed and seen the wonders of the world when it comes to relationships and all of its all shock and glory. And so I've watched, people go on deployment. And as soon as they go on deployment, then, they're moving a guy in the house or the woman in the house. And there's just all the relationships, you got service members that are on Westpac and they're on the carrier and women are getting pregnant on the ship and coming back. And so you're seeing it. And it's like, I don't know how much I can believe in the institution of marriage because folks are just out here just being wild and doing whatever they want to do. And I know I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but I just want to get your perspective because I have you here. And so I felt like this. I've also watched a few folks that are actually, some people that I respect and that are friends. And I've seen it in several different instances where they have not been faithful in their marriage and they stepped out for whatever the reason was. And I feel like there should be only a specific reason on why you would do that, right? If you were trying to fill a void, then you can only fill the void that's missing. You can't go and fill a void and say, oh, well, I was having sex with someone else outside the marriage because you're a bad cook. Like that doesn't equate. But if you're in a sexless marriage, but you're going out and you're having sex with someone else, then I would say that's okay. And I've come to this conclusion, and I know this is probably blowing people's minds right now, but I've seen it where it's worked, where as long as they weren't telling their girlfriend or boyfriends about it, right? And they bore that cross, and they didn't put that burden on the person and say, oh, I feel guilty, and I need to let you know this is what's going on for whatever that is. And typically, that may just be for the season. They're not trying to blow up their marriage. They're not trying to blow up their family. But they are missing whatever that piece is, and they're going to get fulfilled in that little piece. They're keeping it to themselves. And if the situation changes or they navigate through it, then it stops, it ends, and their relationship keeps going on. What do you think about that? Because that's probably pretty crazy. And I mean, you just kind of said to the counter to that is like, you got to be committed. So go ahead. You can.
Listen, just being practical, but also interpreting scripture the way that I want to interpret it when I feel like I want to interpret it my way, is that uh, shake the dust and keep on moving.
Mm.
Cut your losses
Okay.
and keep on moving. And don't feed your pearls to swine.
Mm.
So if it ain't working, don't feel bad. Don't punish yourself. Cut the losses
But
and keep moving.
but there is the 80-20 rule, right? So do you give up a great marriage where she's a great mother, a good provider to the children, takes care of you, but this one thing isn't there. So you're gonna just kind of chuck the baby with the bathwater for that, and knowing that you're probably not gonna find that once you move on, right? And it's like, oh, well, I could go out here and have all kinds of sex and do kinds of things. I'm just using sex as an example right now. But all the rest of it is now gone. So you just learn how to be in a sexless marriage.
Maybe it wasn't meant for you in the first place. Maybe it wasn't as great as you thought it was. Maybe there's something else down the road. You just don't know. But if somebody wants to do something, don't try and make them do it your way.
Got you.
Don't try and force them. No, you're going to stay here with me? And no, I'm not going to let you go. Look, if you want to go, I'll see you later. Gotcha. Because that just opens the door for me as well. Maybe there's something better for me. Maybe God wants me to go someplace else or to do something else. He wants me to expand my horizons to do something on God's behalf. Okay. I don't know. But it's like, don't try and force people to do something that they don't want to do.
Gotcha.
Because that just exacerbates whatever it was. It wasn't a great look. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. You said the word sex, sex. Marwan. Remember I said that I told my kids they could ask me anything they wanted to?
Yes, ma'am.
And I was 80 years old. One of them said, and I gave them cards. If they didn't want to ask, they could write the question on the card. So one of them said, do you ever think about sex? I said, yeah, I think about it all the time. In fact, I'm thinking about it right now. Okay? But it is only the best piece that you're going to get is when you're getting it. That's the best piece in the world.
Wow. All right. I love it. Well, let me flip it on its head. So, and again, I want people to know that, I am not a, what is it? I'm not a person that's in relationships and I'm just, out with different folks and this and that. I'm actually a very monogamous person. But I've just seen things and I've gone through my own experiences. And so I just have a different mindset on that right now. And I just kind of feel like, if there's a void that's there, but everything else is great, I wouldn't say to chuck out the relationship for that 5% or that 10% or that 20%, because you're not likely to find and replace that. You'll be chasing it forever and you'll never be able to replace it. But at the same time, if there's a void that is missing and it's nagging at you, I mean, you should have open communication and try to have that first. But at some point, I think you may need to do something, but it needs to be fair. You can't bring a gun to a knife fight, so to speak. And so I see that when I talk with people all the time, and it's like, well, this person doesn't communicate. So I had sex with this person. Well, no, the problem is communication, not lack of sex, right? So you can't make these false equivalencies, and so that's it. But on the flip side of it, and what I wanted to ask you about was, people have been through lots of things. They've been through infidelity. They've been through domestic violence. They've been through, their spouses had addiction, and they have stayed, and they've gone through and had, maybe 40-year marriage after they've gone through, these trials and tribulations. And many people on the outside looking in will tell them, oh, you need to leave. You need to leave him. You need to get away from her and this and that. And maybe that's the truth. But then on the other side, there's also these examples of, well, I forgave him or her. We worked through it, however we did, either through counseling or communication or through prayer or whatever, and then our relationship was able to last. So any thoughts on that, or any advice that you would impart on someone that might be going through
Yeah,
some of those
um,
things?
I do. We are not privy. We are not privy to what goes on behind somebody's closed doors. We are not privy to what's in a person's head, to what's in a person's heart. And we need to leave it there. If that person or those two people have determined that they want to be together, regardless of what is going on, and no matter what it is you thinking or Miss Joe down the street thinks about it, it ain't your business. You are not privy to what's between of those two people. There could be, in fact, there are a myriad of things that are going on between those two, emotionally, spiritually, financially, and any other kind of thing that you can think of. So leave those two people alone. Do not interrupt, do not disrupt what is behind their closed doors. The only time that you would come in is if you are invited in for advice, for consultation, for whatever.
Well, I think that's what happens a lot is, one party is going through some things and they confide in their friend, right? And their friend is like, oh, no, you need to leave her or you need to leave him. They're bad for you. They did this, that, and the other, and you need to get out of there. And I think sometimes the friend may be giving the advice that they think is helpful and the person needs to hear, but they also can be projecting what it is, how they would feel if they were in the situation, right? Or I don't like this guy,
right,
or I don't like this girl. And, I would tell my sisters, right? They would get into it with their boyfriends and they would tell dad about it. And so what dad would hear is all the bad stuff about the boyfriends. So then the next time when she's made up and they're all lovey-dovey again, it's like, oh, dad, I just love him. And he's looking at him like, child, and it's like, well, you did that because you let dad know all the bad stuff. He's not in love with him. You are. So if you just say all the bad stuff, then of course that's the lens he's going to view this man at. So it's not in your best interest to do that, but people will do that with their girlfriends and boyfriends, and then they end up kind of trapped in the middle of their relationship and their friends. So it just advice on that, because you might need to invite someone in, and you don't know if they could have your best interest, but the advice might not be sound because they're projecting or they don't know how committed you are wanting to work it out. It's not over yet, even though it sounds horrific, that, she was beating on the guy or whatever the case may be, because I like to flip it and not make it always stereotypical. Oh, well, the guy was beating up a woman, but, just your thoughts on that.
Well, as a first responder, remember I use that word first responder.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that being a good listener, because many times, sometimes, oftentimes, a person wants to talk, okay? So you listen, and as that person is speaking and is sharing stuff with you, they're able to begin to think more creatively by hearing themselves speak. And so by your listening and being quiet, it allows them to go deeper into themselves and begin to make some decisions for themselves. And then if they ask you a pointed question, then you've got a telephone book in your head, so you can start letting your fingers do the walking through the yellow pages. And if you need to tell them or say to them or share something with them about where they can go for some quote or resources, you can do that. But you don't go into this situation and say, oh, you know what? I would do such and such, and I wouldn't take that. And no, 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 no.
All right, I love that. And so, and what I'm taking from that is if you are saying that you are a friend to someone, then you have a fiduciary duty to move yourself aside, understand what that relationship is, and maybe just listen. I may not be able to tell you what to do because that's your relationship, but I can just listen and be there for you. Like you said, be that yellow pages, maybe give you some resources and things, encourage you to communicate, maybe talk to clergy, go to a conflict resolution, whatever the case may be. But on the flip side, when we're in crisis and we want to reach out to our friends, understand that we have different friends for different reasons, right? This friend might be the one that can help us with physical things, repairing cars or doing whatever. This one might be our spiritual advisor. And so you're not going to go to the car repair person who is a serial cheater or whatever the case may be, or is just hardcore against relationships, and then ask them, because you already know what you're going to hear. And they may be dealing with their own turmoil and their own experiences that's going to skew the advice that's given to you, and you may make a decision based on bad advice. So I just say I'm speaking to both sides now, because oftentimes we're in a relationship and we're also friends to other people. So just be careful in the advice that you give, and it sounds like to me is listen.
Well, the other thing is, and I have not been speaking too much here. As a minister, as clergy, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So a lot of times people don't want you to speak as clergy, okay? But there have been times when I have just said to somebody, listen, pray. And pray for discernment. Ask God to help you come to, quote, your senses. Where am I? Why am I here? God, give me something to ponder over, to mule over,
Yes, ma'am.
But sometimes we just have to stop in our tracks and we have to go to God. A lot of people don't like to hear that, because it's like, look, I am here today doing such and such and such and such and such. God can't help me with this because I don't even know who God is. Okay? But maybe it's time you found out who God is.
Well, and God is in you. So stopping and slowing down and being reflective, that answer is going to come to you. There's a saying in construction, measure twice and cut once. Don't make a permanent, decision on, a temporary situation. And we see that, right? So, something happens. It's like, okay, we got to do something about it right now. And then you go and it's this knee-jerk reaction. And then what's done is done. And then you've got to deal with the consequences. When maybe you do just need to step back, reflect, and give yourself whatever that amount of time may be to come to, how do I progress forward? We don't have to be so reactionary.
Yeah.
All right. I like that. All right. We have been going for about 2 hours. I got a few more questions.
No, I haven't. Really?
Yes, it is 1:11 already.
Oh, man, I got to go eat.
Well, what I'll do, so the last few questions that I have for you are kind of just wrapping it up. But what I wanted to ask you is, what are some things that people may not know about you?
Oh, really? Oh, well, they may not know that I was in my 70s when I completed my doctorate degree.
Wow.
Yeah.
So which one goes first, Dr. Reverend Hall?
Yeah, Reverend Dr. LeVerne Hall.
Reverend Dr. Hall. I'm so sorry. I'm going to put that into the bio.
No, it's all right. Look, I have been called many bad names, so whatever it is you call me is fine. Okay?
All right.
But, and my doctorate, my thesis was wrapped around the anatomy of Sojourner Truth's spiritual conversion. Because we hear a lot of people say, all you have to do to be saved is to, what is it, confess with your mouth or do something rather, I don't know. But there's more to it than that. And I wanted to find out what it actually was. So I did I looked at it through the lens of Sojourner Truth's life.
Okay.
And did a spiritual, and did an anatomy of her spiritual conversion. And so I'd like for people to know that I'm very proud of what I was able to do at that age. And then I talk about taking the initiative. 3 years ago, I took the initiative to establish a National Recognition Day. And people say, why? What? I said, look, we have National Dog Day. We have National Cookie Day. So I don't know who did that. So don't ask me why I'm doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I can do whatever anybody else does. So I decided that I was going to have a National Recognition Day in November to recognize the life and legacy of Sojourner Truth, as well as contemporary African American clergywomen.
Wow.
Okay, so that's coming up in November. But in addition to that, I'm on my third book relative to that experience. And so it's, just take the initiative and just do the things that you feel like you need to. Write stuff down, write your book, and, just do it.
Just do it. Yeah, and that's so really important. And again, don't worry about the naysayers. Just go forward in faith. I tell people that I don't lose. You got wins and you have losses. I don't lose. I win and I learn. My L is learning. And the only loss that I could ever take is me not trying.
Well, see, I used to do workshops for women, okay? Mm-hmm. And for one of the first things that I would tell them, I'm standing up in front of them, and I said, I have never made a mistake in my life. And I don't anticipate ever making a mistake in my life. Everything that I do is right. And you cannot believe how they would stop and look at me as if to say, well, who does she think she is? But I say this, that as long as we have pencils that have erasers on them, we have ink eradicator. With the computer, we have the delete, redo, and all of that. Everything that you do becomes a learning experience. And so you take that experience and you interrogate it, you tear it apart, see what you did, how you did it, and how you should do it again, because you're going to do it again. So everything becomes a learning experience. You have an opportunity every single day that God gets you up to try it again. And man, quote, I make a lot of mistakes, but I don't make no mistakes because God's going to always give me a second chance. Okay?
And I think that's if you're being true to yourself and you're being a lifelong learner and you're trying to, personally and professionally improve yourself as you go forward in life, right? And you're not just, Lord, take the wheel. And you're not invested in your own life and making improvements in growth. Would you agree with that, or you kind of feel a little different?
Yeah, and one of the things that I do that I'm not ashamed to do, and I have done it a countless number of times, I have said, I'm sorry, let's try it again, I'll do better. I'll make sure that I do better, but I'm sorry I said that, or I'm sorry I did that.
It seems like we need to do that more.
It.
We need to do that more. We don't say we're sorry. We don't apologize and mean it.
Right.
And truly mean it. Because we can work
past that. And a whole lot of people that I've said it to, I shouldn't have said it to them, okay?
Well, and I think that's, if people knew me when I was in my 20s, they wouldn't have a lot of respect for me. Obviously I was a very different person then, but for people that have known me from my 20s through my 30s and my 40s to the man that I am today, then there has to be some forgiveness there and some understanding and some room for growth. And so for people that you don't know, the way that they were raised, their domestication, their experiences have framed them. And it's not that they're bad people, but they may not know any better, right? And so they have to have new experiences. So you have to allow them that grace to learn and to change their thinking and their process. If we just summarily just say, well, this is what you did and you're done. Now, I can say, there could be some things, right? Some people might have done a lot of stuff. It might be hard to get over. But if you have been working on improving yourself and you have changed yourself over a course of time, then you have to let those people back in. You can't leave them out there on an island.
God puts you together for specific reasons. Maybe God wants each of you to learn something from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
And so we shouldn't just stand up above someone looking down and say, well, that's where you are right now, even though at one time you were looking up at someone else. We forget that as we climb up the rungs.
You know what? You asked about something, is something that I'd like for people to know. We always say some of my best friends, okay? Some of my best friends are incarcerated and have been incarcerated most of their lives. Some of my best friends are inmates. I spent about 18 years of my life going back and forth to every prison and jail in the state of Washington.
Wow.
Yeah, and that is one of the most rewarding experiences that I have ever had, is communicating back and forth with lifers, with people,
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I would be sitting on that back pew at Mount Zion Baptist Church, and somebody would come up and pat me on the shoulder, and I'd turn around and look, and it would be somebody that I met in the institution. And they said, I knew I would find you here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, some of my best friends are still incarcerated. Yeah. But they know how to get in touch with Rev Hall because they have permission to call me collect. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Can you tell people the name of your book and where they can find it? Is it on Amazon? How can they get a hold of your book?
Well, they can just, you have my email, post my email. They can email me because I don't do business with Amazon too much, okay?
All right.
They take too much of your money.
I hear you there.
And see, I have lived on welfare. Mm-hmm. So I need most of my money, okay? So I self-publish and I self-market. So you can give them my email. I've got a Facebook page, and I post a lot of stuff on my Facebook page. I probably have written more than probably close to a dozen books on different things. Yeah. But I'm on my third book for this national experience that I am involved with.
So I will definitely make Reverend Hall's information available. Like I said, the perspectives of, our elders are tremendously important. And, you said something earlier that I think is really important, is oftentimes when we have folks that are religious, that have a religious background, the conversation could just be, oh, I've got this problem, or what do you think? And they say, oh, Deuteronomy 5, and they kind of go off on that. And it's like, well, I'm good with the Bible stuff, but I need what you think. Make it worldly for me so I can understand and it's tangible, and what you've gone through. And you're able to wear both hats and do that. So what I say is, don't be afraid to reaching out, whether or not you're religious or that's the denomination that you are, if you're atheist or agnostic or whatever the case may be. Just have the conversations, because there's still wisdom and knowledge and thought there and perspective that is likely that you don't have. And all you can do is just take that information in and then go forward with probably more sound information than some of the places that we go to grab information. So just be considerate of that. And I think that's really powerful.
But then they also have to know that Reverend Hall has the spirit of discernment.
Mm-hmm.
And I can pick junk and crap out in a minute. And I know how to push that delete button, okay?
Yeah.
So don't come at me with no junk.
Right. Yeah, so if you don't want the truth, then don't go to Reverend Hall, because she's going to tell you the truth. So people often want to hear an answer, but they don't want the answer that they really want. It's like, well, that's not what I want you to tell me. I want you to agree with me.
My sister, who is younger, would call me from time to time and ask my advice. And she didn't like what I tell her, so she would hang up. Mm-hmm. And we wouldn't speak. She wouldn't speak to me for like 2 or 3 months. I said, that's all right. You asked me, so I told you. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yep. That's my opinion. You asked me for my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And even if it hurts you and it takes 2 months to get over it, she'll be back.
I knew she would be coming back for more, you know.
I wanted to read a quote from you from our conversation yesterday. You said, when we start thinking as big as the sky, you grow from where you were planted, and the truth grows way beyond where you started and has a global reach. And I thought that was really profound. And as we celebrate Black history, I want to celebrate you and just thank you for being the person that you are, for adding so much value and knowledge and wisdom to the world, and being willing to share it. Because like you said before, it is important that we share it, and that you can be that conduit to younger generations and reach through and connect. And we just really appreciate you. And I want to give you your flowers while you're here, and just say that we love you, and just love the fact that you looked over us when we were, kids at Mount Zion, and we just knew we were in a safe place, and we would run around that church when it was empty and things were going on, but we were safe, right? We were home, and yes, you were a big part of that. So thank you so very much.
Well, my dear, I'd like to say thank you, give you your kudos as well, and just know that you are history. Not from the standpoint of your not being valuable, but that you are making history, you yourself. And just keep doing what you're doing, because what you're saying and what you're doing is what I meant by your truth will spread and grow beyond where you are in that chair.
Yes, ma'am. I humbly accept your words, and I appreciate you. As you can tell, Reverend Hall is a busy woman. She needs to eat, and folks are blowing her up. So we thank you for coming and joining us today. A little applause there for you.
And I applaud all of you as well. Thank you very, very much. It's been a delight and a pleasure, an honor.
Well, thank you. I hope to have you back sometime in the future to talk about some other things, and I'll be in contact with you, soon, just to kind of follow up.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, that is Reverend Hall.
This is my princess way. Bye.
That is Reverend Hall, everyone. So, again, she is the first of our podcast series. So you can kind of see how it goes. Typically, they don't go that long, but I purposely did not slot anyone after Reverend Hall because I knew our conversation was going to go this way, as there was just so much for her to share. And I may even alter some of our other ones, because at first I was like, oh, well, we can do this in 20 or 30 minutes. No, we can't. We're going to need some more time. So again, I appreciate you. The next interview will be tomorrow at 11, and that will be Ashley Robinson, who is right here in Kitsap County. People don't know about what happens in Kitsap County, but Ashley and Erica Robinson are a young Black couple that own 2 semi-pro basketball teams here in Kitsap County. They're going to come and talk to us about their experiences. They compete in China and other countries. And so they've got a lot to share. And then after that, at the top of the hour tomorrow, we have Ramia Sky Cook, another G2 member who is going to come and talk about her perspective and stories as a Black mother living in Kitsap County. So please join us then. We appreciate you. This is The Conduit. And I will see you next time. I'm Marwan Cameron. That was Reverend Hall. Everyone, have a good one. See you later.
Bye-bye.